The Houndsman XP podcast is fueled by Joy Dog Food. Joy Dog Food has a rich tradition of supporting the houndsmen of America. Founded in 1945, Joy is proud of its history and the relationship it has built with the American houndsman. And in 76 years, there's never been a recall. Made with 100% American-made high-quality ingredients, Joy Dog Food has one of the highest calorie-dense formulas on the market. For 76 years, this made-in-America product has kept hunting dogs in the field day after day, season after season. And when we say made in America, Joy has a long track record of fighting for American freedoms by being on the front lines against the animal rights movement and their extremist tactics. Joy will fuel your hounds and fight for your freedoms. Fueled by Joy. You know what app I use on my phone more than any other app besides the podcast app to listen to this here podcast? I use onX. onX Maps is the most comprehensive mapping system for hunters on the market today. I use it all the time. When I was in New Mexico, I was looking at 40,000 acres of ranch that I needed to learn. I flip open onX and just start studying the map. When I'm riding trails, I put the tracking app on. It helps me get around in strange country. I could mark water sources, food sources, bear sign, just all kinds of options within onX. You need to check out onX Maps by going to houndsmanxp.com. Click on the link on our sponsor page. You'll go right to onX Maps, and when you check out, enter the code HXP20 and you will get 20% off of your order. Know where you stand with onX.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Before we get into another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast, I just want to let you know that the podcast is now sponsored in part by the Archives of Falconry located in Boise, Idaho. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Archives of Falconry, it's the leading steward of global falconry heritage. The Archives collects and preserves falconry heritage and the legacy of individual falconers, including their correspondence, memorabilia, art, literature, crafts, and life stories. The Archives also interprets falconry history and celebrates the role of falconers in the birth of raptor conservation. If you're interested in becoming a member or finding out more information, just head to falconry.org. And if you're in the market for a new parent-reared goshawk, being a North American Finnish or Russian goshawk in particular, for the next upcoming hunting season, definitely hit up Seth Roy of North Mountain Goshawks. Produces really nice game birds, and pretty sure anybody that's flown one of his birds will attest to that. If you want to get a hold of him, get on the list before it fills up, just head to northmountaingoshawks.com or hit him up on Facebook at North Mountain Goshawks, or you can send him an email at ostringer3@gmail.com. Now, on to this next episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast.
And so he played with this flock for, for quite some time. It was probably only a minute or two, but it felt like a long time. And at some point, he just picked one out and grabbed it and took it to ground. And he took it to ground in a neighbor's vineyard. And it was just the perfect location for me to leave and where I was and drive around and come up their laneway and down through their fields.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast. And this episode is going to take us back up north again to Canada, where our guest for this episode is from. And I got a chance to meet the guest for this episode for the first time. I believe it was 2019 at the Merlin meet. And if I recall correctly, she was also the guest speaker at that particular meet. And she was talking about some of her experiences flying a perlin. And she's also flown barbaries and other pretty cool stuff in falconry. So naturally, whenever I was trying to start to put together this series featuring falconers from Canada, she of course came to mind, and was happy to get a chance to reconnect and catch up with her. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over now to this conversation that I had with Louise in this next episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast. So here we go. it's kind of hard to believe it's already been, 4 or 5 years? Yeah, it was the 2019 Merlin meet, right?
That's right.
Yeah, no, that was a good time. I really didn't know what to expect kind of going into it. I hadn't been to just many other meets yet besides, just our state ones and just some other odds and ends. But like, that was the first one that I had gone to or gotten a chance to go to where I met a bunch of other falconers really that I didn't have a lot of experience knowing yet or hadn't really talked to yet. And especially like in the micro world.
Yeah, it's a really cooperative and helpful kind of bunch of folks and a really, really great community. My first Merlin meet was in 2009, and I went specifically to meet Al Ross, who was, of course, the Merlin man, and we were all sad to lose him recently. But I can remember walking into the breakfast room down there. There's a bunch of guys kind of dressed in jeans and lots of plaid. And I thought, well, that looks like a bunch of falconers over there. And I didn't know anybody in the state or the club or the town for that matter. And they immediately were very welcoming and very helpful and willing to share all kinds of tips and info on flying Merlins, which was a particular interest of mine at that time and continues to be.
Yeah, I think it was, it's pretty much, up until they stopped more or less doing it recently because of, lots of various factors, I guess. But I mean, like, that was the first time I, of course, gotten a chance to meet Al as well. And, I really enjoyed talking with him also and was just kind of, I was very pleasantly surprised by, like his overall just soft-spoken demeanor and that,
absolutely
accent.
No ego there.
No.
Like just the sweetest guy.
Yep. And then, of course, I'd already gotten a chance to go trapping and see some of, Jeremy's Merlins fly and things like that beforehand. And that's kind of how I found out that it was a thing in the first place anyway. But I also got a chance to meet Joe Wilkin and some of those other guys for the first time too. And I just, like I said, it was a very fun time. I'm glad I got a chance to do it because, I got to meet people such as yourself and, hear you talk about lots of cool, smaller long wing stuff. And, it was neat getting to hear your talk during that meet as well.
Yeah, and being from Ontario in Canada, at that time, we didn't have access to wild birds with the same ease that we currently have, and there really weren't that many people flying them up here, and it was really great to see what they were doing and learn some of the tricks. And so when I came back in 2010. I was able to convince a local breeder to produce a perlin for me, a peregrine merlin. And that hadn't been done in Canada for like 10 or 12 years. And I think it's a difficult hybrid to produce because from what I understand, the breeding seasons don't necessarily overlap that well. And then sometimes you get the chick is just a little bit big for the egg. So they can be a little bit tricky to produce. But a breeder up here, Jim Wilson, who's another really super guy, produced Suclei peels for me. And I started to fly him almost immediately on starlings and on starling flocks. And like in any other region, you're really the first rule of falconry is fly to the quarry that you've got. And I'm in Niagara, just quite near the falls. And there's this little strip of land right near Lake Erie, which is a bit of a microclimate. And we grow a lot of grapes down here, grapes that are used for wine production, and also a lot of tender fruit. So things like cherries and apricots and peaches and that kind of thing. So it's a really mild little zone where we are. And starlings love it. They all kind of migrate down from the rest of the province, hit southern Ontario, which is kind of a banana belt, and think, yeah, this is nice. I'm going to stay here for the winter. And we get these flocks of, 7 or 10,000 that settle into vineyards and orchards and stuff. And So I got lots of starlings, and lots of access to those big flocks that produce those gorgeous murmurations in the sky, and just those really dramatic flights that we love to watch.
I will say that I've noticed, I don't know how it's been for you, but say over the last couple years that I've noticed that there really just hasn't been quite as many starlings come through like our area as much as there has been, in like previous years. I don't know what the deal has been, or
because they're all hanging out in Niagara, eating our grapes.
Okay. Well, and that was going to be my next question. Was obviously you haven't seen that, so
no, we've not seen that at all. No, but I do think that they are migratory, and we do tend to produce residential flocks, like at big dairy farms, both in Utah, as I saw down there, but also here, we will get resident flocks that just hang out and spend the winter there. But in terms of volume of starlings, we've got lots. There's been no shortage. And starlings are an interesting bird in the sense that they're invasive. They're from Europe. And we have starlings in North America because of Shakespeare. In the late 1890s, the Shakespearean Society of New York State decided that they wanted to have all the birds from Shakespeare's sonnets in Central Park. So they brought in starlings, blackbirds, and English house sparrows. And English house sparrows are particularly aggressive and really compete with our local bluebird population for habitat and food. And English house sparrows are really aggressive. They'll go into a nest cavity and peck a bluebird to death and then build their nest on his body. They're really a piece of work. And then starlings, there are no farmers alive that like starlings, whether it's, have cash crops or dairy barns or you're a fruit farmer. They starlings carry salmonella, and they're just a source of contamination. And they're just a nuisance all the way around.
Yeah, and I think that's it's kind of funny you mentioned those things, because I don't think there's a lot of people that are familiar with how those birds came to be in our country. And I was amazed the first time that I learned that, like, all the hundreds of billions of starlings that we have cycling through, this country all came from the first, like, whatever, 120 something or however many, like, it wasn't just a huge number, but it was enough that, they didn't have any problem taking over and adapting. And that's something else I think too, that a lot of people really aren't aware, especially about, like, your house sparrows and stuff. The English sparrows, yeah, they're not nice. They don't coexist very well with other species, and especially the species that we like. And so, there's a lot of people that I think can be overly sensitive sometimes to people wanting to do a lot of pest control and things like that, or abatement for these types of birds, but they also don't realize that these species really aren't very nice. They're pretty brutal species.
Yeah, they're invasive. They're not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
But they make for great flights, so it's kind of a love-hate relationship. Well,
and it's just like we joke all the time amongst circles of friends and stuff that if people aren't a big fan of things like squirrel hawking or hawking the small birds like your invasive sparrows or starlings and stuff, then at some point they're going to have to learn to like it or get out of falconry, probably, because there's always going to be those things to hunt. But some of these other forms of falconry may not always be as prevalent or be able to be around just from all the development and stuff. But you can always count on sparrows and starlings, house sparrows and starlings being around, though.
Well, that's the thing. And as we are experiencing more habitat loss and just dwindling opportunities, at least in the part of the world that I am, for hawking even ducks on ponds. And, we used to have Hungarian partridge here. And if you were a big long winger, you would be able to, fly ducks for a few months in the fall, and then the ponds would freeze over and you could switch to Huns. But we just plain don't have Huns anymore. And it's been habitat loss. It's been, I think it's the neonics that they use in the field. I think that the seed gets coated with stuff that's, derogatory to their populations. And, it's really changed. But small, micro hawking, I think there are increasingly opportunities for that. And that's maybe a bit of a direction it's going. Although, having said that, in Southern Ontario, there's a lot of rabbit hawking and a lot of squirrel hawking, for sure. And Ontario falconers just 2 years ago were given unrestricted access to red-tailed hawks, merlins, sharp-shinned hawks, and Cooper's hawks. So I'm the president of the Ontario Hawking Club, and we had been working with the Ministry of Natural Resources, sort of our fish and wildlife equivalent, for a number of years to improve access for Ontario falconers to those 4 species. And when that came through, it meant that a lottery, kind of a draw system, was eliminated. And now each licensed falconer is allowed to trap 1 bird per season per year. And it's just been fabulous. I mean, it's really changed falconry in Ontario for the better. I know in the States, by law, an apprentice has to start with either a kestrel or a red tail. And I think that's...
Yeah, it varies from state to state, but yeah.
Got it.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I think that's fairly prevalent.
Mostly, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that would be a great system. We don't have that regulation up here, but as much as we can as a club, we really push people towards passage red tails as a first bird, because we've got lots of them, and I mean, they're, again, fly to the core that you've got, and squirrel hawking, rabbit hawking is also pretty successful up here.
Yeah, it varies state to state. I mean, believe it or not, there's actually been some falconers that I've talked to that have never flown a red tail. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Like, I mean, it varies from state to state, but you're right. I mean, as far as like having a good, hardy, first kind of versatile option bird to learn off of, it just so happens that especially here in the States, we're lucky because, like one of the best birds that are most forgiving and also versatile, and you got decent amount of options, and it also is one of the best birds to also learn to kind of have as a falconry bird, is the red tail. And like I said, I would strongly recommend that most people, start off with red tails. And I think that's, I won't say it's unanimous, but I think it's definitely the majority. Yeah,
and I think it's really changed falconry in Ontario for the better to have that option. And I also really, prior to that, when I was getting started in falconry, I don't know, like 20 odd years ago, we didn't have access to wild birds. And so Harris hawks were kind of our go-to beginner's bird, because they're smart and they're versatile. And, that was kind of where folks started. That was my first bird. And there's lots to be said for Harris hawks, but, we're fairly northern climate, not as cold as you think. But if nothing else, I really like the idea that you can trap a bird, and there's a little bit of, you got to have some skin in the game if you're going to put energy into building a trap, going out, spending some time, trying to actually, get a bird in your hands. That's a great filter for, trying to determine if an apprentice has, the commitment that we look for in this sport. So to have to do that instead of just cutting a check, I think is really great. And I also really like that if you decide that this isn't for you, or your life changes or your job changes, you can fatten them up and let them go.
Yep. Turn them back loose. Yep. Yeah. No, I completely agree. And, I, like I said, you'll never hear me say that any system is perfect. I guess I've had the privilege now of talking to, 4-5 different countries and members of the falconry community from 4 or 5 different countries, and learn some about how falconry works in a lot of different areas. And I think it's pretty unanimous that there's no system that's perfect, but it is nice that it's really nice to see, though, when some countries are able to come up with a system that does work and eventually mold something to kind of what meets their needs. So I mean, I'm glad that you guys were able to get a system that worked for you around that area, and it's working out for the better for you.
Although I must say, I'm one of those people that's never actually flown one.
Yeah.
Although I've had 2 apprentices that have trapped and flown their own red tails. So, I think in some ways, it takes a village to make a really good falconer. And I think those that practice falconry at a high level never do it by themselves and never do it in a vacuum. And I know when I have had apprentices, I've been able to, help in some respects and not others. But then, that's where it's been really valuable for me to be able to say to some of my friends, look, I've got this apprentice. Can you find a rabbit field? Because I don't really know what a great rabbit field in my area looks like, or I haven't got time to go and find one. So, I can do muse inspections and talk about equipment and weight management. And then, some of my friends can take them hawking, and I don't know. It's really great too when we can kind of share our expertise. And I think the community in Ontario is pretty good at that.
Good. Well, congratulations. You're now maybe like the 2nd or 3rd falconer that I've talked to that has never flown a red tail. So, it's hilarious. I mentioned that, and then you come out and say, I've never flown a red tail.
And honestly, it's not one that I aspire to. And when I'm flying my perlin in Niagara, I can tell you, I have a very different relationship with red-tailed hawks than most falconers. They're a big concern for me. Again, we have lots of red tails that migrate down to southern Ontario and then don't go any further because these starling flocks, as Jeremy Bradshaw said to me once, they're like food trucks, man. Everybody goes there to eat. And so there's always lots of resident Cooper's hawks and red tails and peregrines hanging around those starling flocks. So red tails make me very nervous. And I'm always encouraging apprentices to come and trap red tails in Niagara, please. We have dozens. Just come and get them.
Nice. Yeah, no, it really is funny too how some different countries have lots of issues with some of these different species that are kind of native to around that area. They don't really migrate to great distances and stuff. I was actually just talking to a falconer recently in South America in Peru, and he said that they're starting to have like a lot of really big issues with Harris's down there, and kind of the similar type situation. They've adapted so well, and there's so many of them now. There's not very many places that are safe for some of these falconers down there to fly because of Harris's, and getting harassed. Their birds getting harassed by Harris's all the time. It's kind of the same problems that some of us have with red tails or Cooper's hawks, or
yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting, and the other thing I always found interesting too was just talking about the guys that are flying some of like the micros out west, and then yourself and here where I live. Red tails are definitely something you need to keep your eye on for sure. But, here we have more of the bigger, like Eastern Cooper's hawks that are bigger as opposed to smaller Western ones and stuff. And it was interesting. Like, for example, the first time that I went out with Jeremy and, saw his birds fly and stuff, and, listening to a lot of the talk at like that Merlin meet about the worry being more about red tails rather than Cooper's hawks when flying micros and stuff. Whereas where I'm at, we would definitely be way more worried about Cooper's hawks still, just because of, so it's kind of interesting hearing about those subtle differences too.
Yeah, and we get those big eastern coops here, and for some reason, now I hope I'm not jinxing myself here, but they don't, I don't tend to see them as much in the field, and it's not that they couldn't be a threat, but they're just that much less prevalent. Like Al was up here for a field meeting to go hawking with us. Oh man, I don't know what year that was. It was maybe 8 or 10 years ago. And Al and Jeremy were both up here. And I had my perlin out, and he flies at about 300 grams, 315 maybe. And I had this really great setup. Starling flock was about half a mile, 3/4 of a mile down the road. And so, I backed up, and my bird does best with a crosswind flight, or actually even a little bit of a downwind flight. He gets real lazy if it's windy and I ask him to fly into the wind. So I had this great setup. I got out of the truck, beeped the bird up, let him go. He flies off my glove, goes up and sits on an electrical wire between power poles. And I went back, sat in the truck, thought we'll give him a second. He usually just takes a minute to kind of evaluate the situation before he launches off. I sat down in the truck, I looked up, and this big female red tail came in from behind, scooped him up off the wire, and starts flying away with him. And I just, you have that moment where you can't get your hand to the doorknob fast enough to get it open quickly. It's just and that seems to take hours. Jumped out, started running and screaming and whistling and blowing my hands and clapping. And I don't know if the perlin bit her or I startled her. Anyway, she dropped him. She let him go. And he wasn't badly injured, but, and they're nervy. And they're always there. Once in a while, my perlin will refuse a flight. Really rarely. It might happen 2 or 3 times a season. And I never push him on it because, he's seeing something that I'm not. And I never lean on him on his weight. It's just okay, dude, this is clearly not on. He gets a lure, we pack it up. We may try another spot, or we may just call it a day.
It's hard to find very many people that, like where I'm at, for example, that have not had run-ins with coops and stuff, and I mean, I had a kestrel that almost got eaten by a coop, the first kestrel I ever flew. I mean, it's just I think it has something to do kind of like with what you were saying too, kind of also where you're flying. And I mean, you do a lot of, you don't really do as much urban, hawking. You do more of the, rural and stuff. And see, a lot of what we do is, especially with the sparrows and starlings and stuff, or where I'm at is really urban, and the coops have really adapted to that setting as well. So I'm sure that has something to do with it as well. But where you're flying also, but yeah, no, I mean, yeah, nobody, it's not, nobody wants to watch their bird get caught by another bird.
No, but the upside is all the vineyard owners are always really happy to see me. And as much as, if you're rabbit hawking and squirrel hawking, you really need, or ducks and all that, you really need to be careful about asking permission and, being respectful of landowners. When I'm flying, I mean, I never really know where the flight's going to end up. And so inevitably it ends up in somebody's vineyard, and I generally just go in and get my bird and get out. And anytime I've ever run into anybody, they're just absolutely thrilled to see me. It's very much a case of, yeah, I've had, come back anytime. I've had winery owners, bring me wine to the truck. It's yeah, no, anytime you just come here. So I get a bit spoiled that way.
Sounds like it. No, it's a good problem to have, Yeah, it's, I mean, I can think of, I can't really think of very many people that would frown upon having wine bottles and stuff brought to their truck, as
it's a bit of a shock.
Yeah. It's just well, no, I don't want that. What the hell am I going to do with that? I don't think very many falconers that I know of, at least, would shun getting an extra reward for having nice, places to fly. So yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're a little spoiled in a way.
Yes. Although, I'm working now on trying to get a barbary going. So all that I'm used to, and all that kind of familiarity and convenience is going out the window, because I'm trying to get a bit of a barbary breeding project going and fly one of those birds on mourning doves up here. And mourning doves do migrate out, so it's gonna be a much shorter season, and I think a little bit tougher go. But we'll see how that goes. Back in 2016, again, Jeremy and Al and I and our friend Dave Doughty and Stephanie, Jeremy's wife, went to Ireland to an Irish field meet, and it was fabulous. Anybody that's listening to this that hasn't traveled to a neighboring state or to a NAFA meet, or just kind of gotten out of their little bubble, man. Do it if you can. I know it's expensive and it takes time, and you got to get booked off work and all that stuff. But man, it's always such an experience, and you meet such fabulous people, and just learn things that you never would have got around to. So we went to this Irish field meet, and they were flying barbaries and red napes on snipe for the most part in these bogs. And they were just fantastic flights, and then you'd come back after these days in the field, and there's all this great pub life and beer and Guinness and fish and chips. And it was brilliant. And the British and the Irish, there's such a formality to their hunting still. And I mean, these, they wear a 3-piece suit in the field, and a white shirt and a tie. And there's this, I suppose, holdover from when it was more of an aristocratic endeavor. And we're much more casual about it, obviously, in North America. At the time that I was at this field meet and hawking in the field with these men in their tweeds, we were having our field meet back in Ontario. And I'm getting pictures, sent to me from the dirt hawkers out in the field. And honest to God, they look like homeless people, with their jeans and their plaid and their toques. And I'm just, anyway, it was great fun. So it was also really, just a bit eye-opening to see these flights. And they didn't necessarily need a lot of height from the birds. If you're up 400 feet, that's sufficient. And anyway, these snipe flights were just spectacular, and the whole intersection of close working dogs in that environment was really inspiring. So I came home and decided that I wanted to fly barbary, and barbaries weren't at that time being bred in Canada, and the Americans can't export them. There's some trick in your regs. We can't get them from you. So I imported 5 barbaries from England the next year. And, I actually imported 3 barbaries and 2 red napes, and have been trying to get the red napes to breed. That's been a bit more difficult. But the barbaries have been successful. And so I kept one for myself last year for the first time. And did a 4-week window a la Lynn Oliphant, which is for those that aren't familiar with it, it's a tame hacking process that takes young birds that are just almost hard penned and removes them from the nest. And you worked with getting them man down and having a little bit of exposure to you before they can actually fly. And then when they start to fly, it's a really natural progression of calling them down at night to the lure, handling them a little bit, hurting them a little bit, and then they just get more and more time on the wing. Ideally, you still call them in at night, but they're out all day. And by the time that ends, which is usually after about 10 to 14 days, you've got a bird that just is ready to roll right into falconry. It's ready to be, droned or kited and, maybe, practiced with a little bit of, live flights. And it makes for great birds. So I did that with my bird last year and his sister, and that was a lot of fun. So that's kind of the next chapter for me is is working to that end. I also got a dog last fall. I got a field-bred English cocker from a kennel in Georgia. So I've been learning lots about training dogs.
Yeah, no, it's that's a whole other animal, literally and metaphorically.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of gone a little couple different directions with the dogs as well. With dachshunds, from Vizslas and things like that too. Yeah, I mean, it's a whole other time consuming thing, and it becomes something else that just is also its own thing that you like to enjoy too. It's like I said, it's this stuff. I mean, you can never have enough time for any of this stuff. It's just there's.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, there's never ever going to be enough time. But speaking of which, I want to go ahead before I do want to ask you a little bit more about your perlin and your barbaries. But before we kind of go into that, I think now would be a good time to go ahead and just hear a little bit about how you got into falconry and hear a little bit about your background with that before we transition back and before I pick your brain a little bit more about some of these other things.
Sure. So back in 1999, my husband and I sold a small business, a butcher shop that we had been running, and bought 20 acres of grapes in Niagara. And not knowing really anything about grape farming, never having done any of that in our lives, but being abundantly overconfident that was something that we could pull off. And we busted our chops those first couple of years growing really great quality grapes. And it absolutely ticked me off that September and October would roll around and you would get these massive flocks of starlings that just disappear into the vineyard. And it's not that if they took a grape and left with a grape, that'd be actually fine. But they don't. They hang off the clusters and they peck at them because they're looking for the sweet juice. And once you've ripped those clusters open, that attracts fruit flies. And fruit flies bring contamination and volatile acidity, and that just really, it leads to breakdown and contamination of the fruit. So there are a number of things that you can do to discourage bird pressure in a vineyard. Netting is one option. It's a pretty expensive option. We have bird bangers that we put out that replicate the sound of a shotgun going off, and it's a series of 3 blasts. And these bird bangers are powered by a propane tank. And it's the exact same thing that you have on your barbecue at home. There's a propane tank. It feeds propane into a little bladder. The bladder's on a timer with a sparker. And then about every 20 minutes, there's this series of 3 blasts that goes off. And I just have to say, we often get American tourists at the winery who are appalled that we allow hunting in such close proximity to the tasting room. You guys have a little different relationship with your guns than we do up here in Canada. It's not guns. It just sounds like guns. Mm-hmm. That is somewhat effective, but birds get really used to it. And the other thing that we do is we have what's called a squawk box. And so that is a recording of birds in distress that we play. And the idea is that other birds will hear that and think, hey, Johnny over there is getting beat up. I guess I should stay away from there. So that works a little bit too. Anyway, you kind of try all these things with various degrees of success. And then I was at a fall fair and I saw a guy who had a whole bunch of birds of prey staked out. And I thought, oh, wow, that's cool. Surely there's got to be some intersection of using these. And this is 2000. So this is before the internet really has made any kind of a splash. And it just seemed to me to be a really interesting intersection of capitalizing on a natural predator-prey relationship. And on the property, we do a lot of things that are organic and as kind of as biodynamic as we can be. So if there's something that we can do that's a bit innovative and not necessarily, as traditional as, then we're interested. We don't spray insecticides. We introduce beneficial insects that eat the bad guys. So if there's a way that we can approach that, we will. We still spray, and we still spray systemics if we have to. But if we've got some wiggle room, let's be creative. So that's how I got started in it, was out of a desire to do what I now know is called bird abatement. And what I now know is there's a whole industry around that. There's not much of an industry in Canada. I mean, I don't actually know anybody in Niagara that does that for a living. Our farms are much smaller, and the economics of doing that up here aren't the same as doing it in the States. Bird abatement that is done in Ontario tends to be at landfill sites, garbage dumps, transfer stations, golf courses, that kind of thing. It isn't really done on a farming level. There's a little bit of blueberry crops, I guess, in Ontario that has some abatement work done, but it's not nearly the industry up here that it is for you folks in the States. So that's where I started. And that hence the Harris hawk. And that was fine for a while. Falconry in Ontario is a 2-year apprenticeship program, which constitutes 15 months, 2 of which have to be October seasons in the field. So you need to actually get out there and do some falconry. I did that for a few years, and that was fine, but ultimately it just kind of wasn't as interesting or as satisfying as it could be. So I started to fly some other species. Somebody gave me a lander that I worked with for a little while. I flew a saker for a bit. Then I kind of got interested in merlins and working with smaller birds. And starlings were always it's always about feather for me. It's never really been about fur. Did do a little bit of rabbit hawking with the Harris for a bit. He got kicked off a few times and decided that, starlings were smaller and easier. These rabbits that kind of hoof them around, not so much. So it's always kind of been about feather for me.
Okay. Yeah. And yeah, it's kind of funny you mentioned the whole, like the Harris thing. And yeah, there's guys that I know that have done abatement too, that, I mean, when they use a Harris for that purpose, they don't even have them on fur at all because of that very reason. They get so wed, to the, the one type versus the other. But no, that's cool. I mean, I think there's been some other falconers that I've talked to that have kind of got into it more from the abatement side and, ended up doing both and all that kind of stuff. But
no, I do very little abatement now. Like, honestly, it's, and I had a kestrel for a while. I did a little bit of car hawking. That's really super fun. And I would even car hawk the Harris a bunch. I mean, he took a whole lot of starlings that way and some grackles. And that was loads of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like I said, I've told people many a times that it's hard to find more just pure fun in falconry than doing the good old fashioned car deals and stuff. But whether people's views on that are meet or not, it is what it is. It's still fun.
I mean, it's ambush, which is which is a style. But yeah, no, it's fun and depending again on your situation and where you live and what you have access to,
Yeah, sure.
As long as you get your bird out and hawking him and he's catching some game, I think that's the bottom line.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's the definition of falconry, and, but yeah, no. So yeah, that's cool. And it sounds like you had kind of a little bit of a diverse beginning in it then, I mean, except for the red tails, of course. Didn't get the red tail experience, but I've
not had red tail, but I would like to have a Cooper's hawk experience one of these days. And I did trap a Sharpie a few years ago, and flew her for a little bit. But man, I kept waiting for her to turn into a merlin. I kept waiting for this disposition to kind of click into something that I recognized and was more comfortable with. And ultimately, I had a transmitter fail on her, and she just flew away.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd be waiting for a while if you're waiting for that.
Yeah, I know. I just couldn't kind of get my brain around the zipper thing, but I would like to. But as you said earlier, there's not enough time. There's not enough lifetimes,
Yeah.
to kind of go down as many avenues with this as you'd like to.
For sure. Yeah. Well, and so let's go back then, now that we've kind of heard about your kind of introduction and how you kind of branched into falconry. I mean, I am curious. I mean, you have experience now with the perlin and, with these barbaries. And I mean, what are some of the differences that you've noticed in dealing with these different species as far as, their disposition, how you go about working with them? And, I mean, have you noticed that there's a big difference there, or, is it kind of similar up to a point, or?
I think it was a big moving from flying a Harris and, doing some car hawking with kestrels and, kind of mucking around with that kind of stuff. And as you say, it is a lot of fun. Moving into the perlin was a big step for me. It was a whole different mindset. And I was really lucky to have a good friend, Dave Dowdy, who's he's from California. He grew up in the, 70s before there was rules and regs, and, he kind of hogged everything. And he really helped me get the perlin going on starlings. And I'll never forget, and we often laugh about this, we had a really good setup on the starling flock, and the perlin, it was early days for the perlin, and it just wasn't clicking. And the bird had gone up and sat on a power pole, and Dave said, "Get in your car and drive towards the flock." And I just kind of looked at him and like, "Get in my car and drive away from my bird." As a short winger, you don't often do that. I'd have been a long time coming around to thinking that was going to be a good thing to do. But that's exactly what I did. I got my car and I drove toward the flock, and the bird followed. And that kind of flight and that kind of setup is a little bit, unique in the falconry world. Those, being that far out from the flock, and having to have those clear lines of sight, it's a pretty specific type of flight. But in terms of disposition, I mean, I think there's just a lot of long wing basics that apply, and I think there's a lot of common practice between it. The barbaries, I mean, barbaries are really sweet to work with. A lot of the folks around here are flying bigger female peregrines on ducks, and then they go to southern Saskatchewan for a couple of months, to fly huns and sharp-tailed grouse. The birds that they're flying, they're flying in a similar style. I think there's a lot of commonality amongst the longers. I think the differences are pretty subtle.
So, for example, like I've heard from a lot of people that have flown barbaries that it can be kind of a pain sometimes because they naturally just love to go way out, and sometimes they don't like to want to stay really overhead. Sometimes they can, range way out. Once again, I'm going to go ahead and give the disclaimer that, of course, falconers have a very differing plethora of opinions and experiences, and so.
Well, and barbaries do, especially males in their first season, have a reputation for having a dispersal instinct and wanting to just leave.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I was careful with this one and I live fairly close to the American border. Like I'm probably, in miles, how far would I be? 30 miles from the American border. So if this bird decides to travel, like I'm in trouble, right? And in the fall, I keep my passport in the truck with me. God knows how I'd get him back. But anyway, it's always in the back of my mind that I may need to cross that border. Anyway, so I was pretty careful to keep him on a really short leash in September and really kind of keep the lid on things, keep them really close. We did some droning, but it was always very close quarters. And I started to get more ambitious with bigger scale and longer flights in October when I was more confident. And I didn't have issues with him, skying out I had one day, and I was flying him way too heavy, and it was sunny, and there was thermals, and it was everything that I should not have been doing. And yeah, he decided to go on a little cross-country tour that day. But that's not been my experience. Now, I also did 4-week window with this bird, and maybe that's made a difference. Maybe I've got a little bit more fidelity in the field because of that. I would like to have had his 4-week window, like his his tame hack experience, to have gone a little longer, but I actually got COVID and had to cut it short by about 3 days or 4 days. But I would like to have pushed that envelope longer. And if I do another Barbary, in a 4-week window thing, I'd push that as far as I could. But that may make a difference with fidelity in the field with this guy. I'm not sure. Also, my experience with Barbaries is limited to one bird. So I am not professing to be any kind of expert, and I got lots to learn about them.
Okay. Well, fair enough. And one bird's more experience than I have with them, so, but, you always hear a lot of different things about people's experiences with different, and anybody that spends any amount of time in falconry knows that a lot of what you have to take from a lot of different people, there's so many different asterisk marks and specific circumstances. It's really hard to narrow down what is really, what may be their truth and may not necessarily be your truth or your experience if you end up doing, something similar. So, that's why I like asking those kind of questions. And, I didn't know how different the experience was training, like the perlin, the barbary versus.
Wow. Different though, because I'm flying them in different styles. Like the perlin is an off the glove pursuit kind of flight, even though he's going out, half mile, 3/4 of a mile to get to the flock. That is off the glove. And, whereas, the Barbary is waiting on. So, a little bit sort of different stylistically there. But, and training the perlin in those flights, he picked it up pretty quickly once he realized that he had to be above the flock. And that only took about 4 or 5 flights before he got there. Then it came together actually really well. And he, once he had just that little bit of experience, and I think they get fit by flying, by hawking. And I'm not one who spends a lot of time, doing a lot of lure stooping, a lot of Korean spike. If I kind of want to get out into the field. You have to have some minimal level of fitness to be successful, but also, again, because you're back to predation and I need to fly a bird that can, evade if he needs to. But now I'm at a stage with the perlin where he doesn't actually like lure work. he gets pretty turned off pretty quick. So I do a little bit of that and then we just go out, we hit the fields. But in terms of training, just some basic fitness, some game that he knew he would be able to catch early on was really significant. I don't do too much of that either. I don't want to give him too much easy stuff. And then just get them out in the field. But he learned fairly quickly to get above the flocks and was pretty successful early on in his first season. So I would encourage anybody that has access to those kind of flocks to really consider them. Female merlins will give you also, if you get the right merlin that's engaged in that kind of flight, you can have some really spectacular flights from them as well. Even a small, I think you could do that kind of thing with a Tearsal Barbary or, probably, I don't know I don't have access to prairie falcons. I don't know how they would be, but they're kind of in the same weight range. I think you get some just spectacular flights and maybe even better flights from a small Barbary on starting flocks because the flock tends to respond a little bit more, significantly to a predator that's a little bit larger. So I think, in comparison to a female merlin flight, the male perlin does elicit more of a response because the flock has just that much more, takes him that much more seriously. And I think if you had a small Barbary in those flights too, they could be pretty fun, pretty impressive.
Kind of been trying to figure out what might be doable, in an area like mine, for example. I know we have snipe in areas around here. I know we have.
Oh, baby, you've got snipe?
Well, I mean, it's not. We don't have snipe as far as like the abundance of what you would see in like what you saw in Ireland, or like what I saw in Mexico. There might be, but I haven't found the areas for them yet. But we do bump them quite often, on occasion, randomly, whenever we're out like dirt hawking and stuff. That being said, we also have dove and things like that. So, species like red napes, barbaries, and, I would have loved to have seen what that tiercel prairie that I flew briefly before he ended up dying of his infection. I would have liked to have seen what he could have even done, on some of this stuff. But I'm always interested in finding what people's experiences are with some of the, the other species like red napes, barbaries, and things that we don't see very often.
I'm eating the barbaries now, and I'm exporting to the States, so we'll have to get hooked up with something.
Well, I would love to figure out if it's doable or not. And I have an idea of how I think it could work. We have lots of fields around where we're at, and especially after the corn gets picked and stuff here, we always have lots of doves around these different fields and stuff here. So I think that might be something that would be kind of cool to try.
Yeah, and you don't need huge pitch for this, right? Because if the bird's up too high,
well, exactly,
then you have to cover. So you get 350, 400 feet.
Yeah.
That's really all you need or want.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I was in California a few years ago and watched, like Keith Richmond and some of those guys fly sparrows with their Jack Merlins. Mm-hmm. And those flights are so fun. And the sparrows kind of are deacon in and out, and the Jacks just keep pitching up. And that's a similar version somehow to the barbary and snipe in Ireland. I mean, you've got this, a smaller scale, but you've still got the long wing and the wheat flash, and it's all a little bit, I guess, a smaller scale than the long wing falconry I'm used to seeing, which is, on ducks on a pond, or, that just takes, you got birds going up 1,000 feet and all that kind of thing. That's stunning as well and takes a ton of talent. But these flights are a little bit more closer in, excite me a little bit more. Just kind of.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I've seen both now, multiple times, also in multiple countries, and I can say that, like, I don't know, getting a chance to see, for example, a lanner fly, at a lower pitch, in like South Africa, for example, I felt like, even though a lot of it was still taking place a little bit further ahead and everything, still felt like I got to see a lot more than, say, a duck hawking where the bird is going to randomly take a bird. It could be like a mile away. You don't even hardly get to see the stoop. You see the stoop, but you don't get to see the contact. So yeah, I mean, I think that something like that, it definitely a much lower pitch, like you were saying, and like whenever I got a chance to see the guys snipe hawk in Mexico, they were flying at a much lower pitch. Yeah,
there's an immediacy to that. That's I think really just pushes my buttons.
Oh yeah, no, I am 100% in agreement with you. Like the snipe hawking with peregrines in Mexico so far is like the most fun thing that I've seen with the bigger, once again using the quotes, bigger long wings. I think it definitely, like the flights and then just the type of action. It definitely it was awesome. Yeah, I definitely pushed the buttons for me too.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the great thing about falconry is you've got all these little specializations within it. I mean, somebody recently, made the analogy that falconry is like a tree, and the main trunk is this bit of commonality that we all have in terms of what constitutes safe equipment and safe housing and understanding of weight management and all of that. But as you move up the tree, you very quickly branch out into long wing, short wing, siphoners, and then you get into all these tiny little branches and offshoots that are really specialties. And then every and everybody, given their geographical location, even does it slightly differently. Red tail hawking I'm sure the Midwest is going to be a little bit different than it is in Southern Ontario. So I think that's really part of the fascination too of it for me, is that there are just so many representations, and it can be done very well and so very differently in a lot of places on the planet.
Oh yeah, for sure. I agree 100%, and that's part of the reason why I like traveling and seeing it in so many different places. Cause I think it's just, to me, I just think it's awesome getting a chance to see all these differences in how people do it from country to country, state to state, place to place, province to province. Or, I think that I think people are missing out if they don't get to see it, honestly, so I agree with you on that.
They travel a little bit, even just to another state, and just once in a while,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's eye-opening.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I know that we could probably, talk each other's ear off the rest of the day about, some of these different things for sure. And I know probably both of us are going to kick ourselves after we end this recording, because there's things we could probably go into more detail on. But before we do end this, I do want to get like one of your favorite hunting memories, experiences, stories, with, one of your best times in the field, or, a favorite memory with a bird. Any of those things before we wrap up, though.
Well, so one of my favorite hunting memories is certainly with the perlin, and it's one of the best flights that I had. And this is one that I'll always see in my mind's eye when I'm old and gray and toothless and have to hire somebody to chew my food for me. This will live on. It was a flight that was quite close to my home farm, which is one of the great things about the hawking I do, is there's such immediacy to it. And I had set the bird up on a flight, and he went up and flew them fairly well, but it wasn't actually all that impressive. And as he kind of started to return to me in my general direction, it started to rain. And so there was this kind of drizzle coming down, and I couldn't use my binoculars to see the flight because everything was just kind of getting wet. And looking at a bird through the binoculars in a flight with starlings is a very different thing anyway, because you really just see such a small representation of it. And there's often, if it's a big flock, this really larger undulation and kind of school of fish movement that's going on. So I had to put the binos down, and the bird changed direction at some point and started to head away from me and really climb. And I thought, oh God, where's he going now? And this flock picked up that I hadn't seen. And there must have been 10,000 birds in this flock. And he just controlled it from the very beginning. He stayed above them, and he does these kind of little fake dives and dipsy doodles, and they respond to that, but he doesn't actually lose any height. I think he's checking the flock to see, where there's a weak flyer, or where there's, the village idiot that's going to bolt, or who looks a little bit vulnerable. And so he played with this flock for, I don't know, for quite some time. It was probably only a minute or two, but it felt like a long time. And at some point, he just picked one out and grabbed it and took it to ground. And he took it to ground in a neighbor's vineyard. And it was just the perfect location for me to leave and where I was and drive around and come up their laneway and down through their fields and walk up to him. There was no pond I had to traverse. There was no mucking around in a bog or trying to figure out how am I going to get there or worrying about permission. This was my neighbors. I know them well. And I just, walked right up to him in the field on it. And it was all just so beautiful and so textbook. And those rare flights that stay with us and yet also motivate us, because we think, oh yeah, I want another one like that next time. This is why I do this. And actually, you get one of those a year or two of those a year if you're lucky. And a lot of times it's a lot more work, or you're trying to get them back in much more challenging circumstances. And this was just, everything came together beautifully.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like almost each one of those recalls, or there's some kind of hazard. It's almost kind of like playing the old, Atari game like Pitfall or whatever, where you're trying to jump over crocodiles and swing over like pits and wading through cow patties and everything else just to get your bird back. Yeah, no, that's cool. It always is nice whenever you don't have to go through the extra BS and can just enjoy the end of, the flight and just the culmination of a lot of hard work, really.
Yeah, it was beautiful. It was just poetic.
Very cool. Well, like I said, I know we could talk all day, but before we do end, now that we got one of your favorite stories, I do want to end on the same note that I've been ending on, and get the best piece of advice that you think you can leave. What do you think is the best piece of knowledge that you could pass on to either current generation or future falconers? And we'll just kind of end on that note and call it good.
Wow. That's tough. Other than get in your car and drive away from your dog, or drive away from your hawk.
Don't get into falconry.
Yeah, that's good advice. Man, just remember that it's supposed to be fun, and that we do this. We are privileged to be able to do this and to have the time in the free time and the leisure time that it takes is, we're fortunate to have that. And just don't forget, it's supposed to be fun. I think sometimes it gets a bit competitive, gets to be about head counts, gets to be about, I'm not doing this enough, or I could be doing this better. Just remember, it's supposed to be fun. Make new friends, meet people that you would otherwise never have in your life because you have this thing that's so unusual in common, and that just opens all kinds of doors. And that's really cool. And we're lucky to have that too. For sure.
Well, I think that's something. It's another one of those things that people, I don't think, can hear enough. So I appreciate you sharing that. And, I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know we've been kind of working on this for a few months, and I'm glad that we were able to finally get it ironed out and get a time nailed down to do this and catch back up, because it's been a minute.
Yes, you've been patient in accommodating my schedule, which has been really a bit unpredictable lately. So thank you. Thanks for being persistent. Yeah. And I really appreciate the interest. And I'm really very flattered that you asked him to be included in this series. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. And we'll talk more about your breeding project and stuff sometime. And I do want to find out some more about that too. But for now, like I said, we'll go ahead and call this good. And we'll talk a little bit more once we end the recording here. But like I said, thank you. And like I said, I appreciate it.
Flying high.